Welcome to the channel. Today's story isn't just about rules, it's about power, betrayal, and the kind of quiet revenge that leaves a mark. You won't believe what this HOA tried to pull or how it all came crashing down. I'm Nia, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA that went too far, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because, trust me, these stories only get crazier. Now, let's get started. It all began with a seed. Not the kind that comes neatly packaged in a paper packet, mind you, but one delivered unexpectedly with a frown, a flash of self-importance, and the sharp tap-tap of shoes echoing across concrete at 7:22 on a sunlit Saturday morning. Sam opened his front door with his mouth full of toast. The crust scraped his lips, and the sound of his teeth against bread filled the quick silence before he met her eyes. Mrs. Loretta Kingsley, chair of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. Tall, fussy, famous for her bony finger and her yearly treatise on property bylaws. The air around her always smelled faintly of lavender and high expectations. She held a folded letter, crisp and sharp-edged like a weapon. Across the threshold, the sound of distant lawnmowers and the low hum of a neighbor's dog just waking up tried to pretend everything here was normal. But Sam's stomach twisted. He'd gotten notes from the HOA before, a warning here, a friendly reminder there, but today Loretta's face was pinched, her knuckles white on that single page. Sam wiped crumbs from his chin. He stepped out, letting the screen door close behind him, the weight of the letter pressed meaningfully between them. "You've been served," Loretta said, as if she were a bailiff in a TV courtroom. Sam forced a crooked smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Kingsley." She didn't return it. He took the paper, his thumb hesitating at the crease. He caught a whiff of his neighbor's coffee and heard the steady trickle from the garden hose next door, but the world felt suddenly smaller. The letter outlined in cold, meticulous language all the ways in which he was failing his community, but the real accusation, the one that stung, was line 3. Unauthorized edible plants present on lawn, immediate removal required per section 9.3 of the Willowbrook Appearance Standards. His tomato plants. The ones he'd started for his daughter Emma, she loved watching for tiny green fruit squealing when she spotted the first blushing red orb through the tangle of leaves. For Sam, they were just tomatoes, stubborn, sun-seeking, unremarkable to anyone but Emma. But for the HOA, they were a blight. He looked over Loretta's shoulder, searching for the familiar green cages in his front bed. Beyond them, the street curved in its perfect arc, precisely trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, the water tower peaking just above the slate roofs. Anywhere else, it might have been just a misunderstanding, but this was a declaration. He met Loretta's eyes. Hers lacked any warmth. "Section 9.3, he asked quietly. She sniffed. "No exceptions, Mr. Harris. Curb appeal is the pillar of Willowbrook." She smiled then, a cold one, a shade of triumph in it. She turned briskly, shoes striking the walkway as she headed to the next house. Sam stood alone. Sunlight glared off the HOA letter. He read it again, the words sharper this time. Beneath his feet, tomato roots quietly stretched even as the heart of the neighborhood seemed to shrink. As he looked back at those innocent plants, the question burned, what kind of person gets so angry at a tomato? Or maybe it was never about the tomatoes at all. But before Sam could even guess at the real reason, he heard Emma's small feet patter behind him. Steady, who was at the door? Sam tucked the letter behind his back, smile forced as thoughts tangled in his mind. Something told him this was just the opening move, a test, but what game was actually being played? And why did it feel, suddenly, like the ground rules had changed without anyone asking him? The morning didn't get easier. Sam set the letter on the granite counter and watched it flatten itself, as if trying to blend into its sterile, indifferent surroundings. Emma sat at the kitchen table, swinging her legs against the polished wood, humming. There was jam on her cheek and a lock of hair falling over her eye. He took it in, the sun slicing through the window, dust hanging lazily in the air, the quiet hush to the early hours before the world fully woke. All this normalcy felt suddenly fragile. He moved through the motions, making toast, pouring juice, but his mind kept circling back to the words, immediate removal required. Was Loretta watching, even now? Sam walked to the front window. With one finger, he hooked the edge of the curtain and peered out like a conspirator in his own home. The street outside looked peaceful, the slow jogger in neon shorts, the distant blur of garbage trucks. But he noticed small things that suddenly felt hostile. The line of cars, all meticulously washed, parked at exact intervals. The way the grass on every single lawn was identical in height and gloss. The little blue HOA sign standing near the cul-de-sac, a smug reminder of unseen authority. Emma wandered up behind him, the hem of her dress brushing the back of his leg. "Why are you looking at the tomatoes?" she asked. Sam glanced down at her, at the hope in her face. She didn't know. She wouldn't understand why someone might want something so simple, so harmless, to disappear. He knelt beside her. "How many tomatoes do you think will be ready this week?" She thought about it, eyes narrowing. 4. Or maybe 5 if the little one gets bigger. Sam tried to smile. "Let's check after breakfast." But even as he said it, he was listening for something else. Footsteps, a car pulling up, any sign that the next act was about to begin. He drove Emma to school, waving at neighbors whose faces felt less familiar now, each one a possible informant. He replayed yesterday's block party in his mind. Loretta had smiled at him then, had she not? Or was it more of a measuring glance? When did this become so adversarial? By 9, he was back at home, the house echoing with an emptiness that felt colder than usual. He sat at the kitchen table, unfolded the letter again, and read every word. Was it so unreasonable to want a bit of color by the porch, 2 cages, some basil, marigolds, all tangled together? What harm did a tomato do? The rules didn't say why, just what. He found the HOA bylaw packet in a kitchen drawer, the kind of glossy, densely typed booklet that no one reads but everyone fears. Section 9.3, Landscape and Appearance. No edible plants may be grown in the front yard unless explicit permission is granted by the Willowbrook Homeowners Association Board of Directors. He flipped through the packet. There was no mention of tomatoes in the examples, no mention of lettuce, peppers, nothing specific, just those broad, damning 2 words, edible plants. His phone buzzed. A new email alert. He clicked on it, dread settling like dust. From Willowbrook, HOA. Subject, final notice, front yard edibles. This email constitutes your last warning before formal action. Non-compliance by June 8th will result in fines and possible escalation to the legal department. He stared at the screen, his jaw clenched. He had never been fined by the HOA. He'd paid his dues, even hosted last summer's ice cream social, but now the lines felt drawn in something thicker than ink. Was this about him, or was it about control? He couldn't stop replaying Lorette's voice, no exceptions. He wondered, wildly, what would happen if he simply ignored the letter, or ripped it in half, or dug up the tomatoes and planted them around the back where only he and Emma could remember they once tried to grow something beautiful. His chest felt tight. He circled a day on the calendar, 3 days until the deadline. 3 days to decide if he would surrender to a rule that made no sense or fight back. His gaze slipped again to the tomato plants outside, sunlight glinting on their leaves, small and unapologetic. But even as he looked, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A small, white flag staked next to the porch, pressed so close to the dirt that it could only mean one thing. Someone had marked the plants for removal already. There was a strange, cold thrill at the thought. Sam's heart beat a little faster. What would Loretta do if she found them still thriving on Monday? He realized suddenly that fighting might not just be about tomatoes anymore. What else did the HOA have up their sleeve, and just how far did they expect him to bend before he broke? Time thickened as the deadline crept closer. Sam tried to lose himself in work, tried to be present for Emma's bedtime stories, her nightly question, are the tomatoes safe? It was a question laced with innocence, with an anxiety he wasn't ready to explain. He scoured the HOA bylaws late at night, highlighter in hand, searching for loopholes. Was a tomato a fruit, technically? Could he argue them as ornamental? Was basil a flower? The words on the page refused to become allies. On Sunday, 2 days before the deadline, Sam dragged the lawn chair to the edge of his property, coffee mug in hand. A moving truck rumbled down the street. Children's bikes littered the sidewalk. The tomatoes stood in their cages, bright and stubborn. He watched as a white SUV stopped beside his driveway. The window rolled down. Rich, the neighbor across the street, leaned out. His jaw said, "Morning, Sam." Hey. Rich frowned. There was a heaviness in his eyes, an uncertainty. Loretta stopped by last night. Said, "The board is getting strict." "She threatened you?" Sam asked, mouth dry. Rich hesitated. "She said the rules are for everyone. Gave me a warning about my mailbox paint. Told Karen our azaleas are too close to the sidewalk." Sam studied him. Normally, Rich had easy jokes. Not today. "I thought maybe you could just move them," Rich asked, voice low. A wave of bitter warmth rose in Sam's chest. "You ever feel like we should get a say in what happens here?" Rich's gaze slid away. "It's easier not to push back." Sam looked down at his cup. He could almost hear Loretta rehearsing her lines, weaving into every corner of their lives. He forced himself to ask, "Why do you think she's doing it?" Rich gave a half-hearted shrug. "Control, I guess. Or maybe she's bored." But there was more. Sam felt a warning beneath Rich's words, a threat disguised as neighborly advice. When Rich drove off, Sam walked the grass, hands in his pockets. He ran a finger along the tomato cages, warm from the morning sun. He checked the leaves for pests, for that one first sign the season might fail them after all. At the edge of the curb, Sam paused. His feet left small divots in the perfectly trimmed sod. He looked down the block. Every house the same, every rhythm dictated. He bent and pulled the small white flag from the dirt. Nobody stopped him. From the window across the street, he felt a curtain twitch. He thought, maybe this was bigger than his garden. Maybe Loretta's fight was with anyone who refused to fall in line. He imagined other neighbors quietly swallowing unfair rules to keep from drawing attention. For the rest of the day, Sam watched the tomatoes, refusing to move them. But when dusk fell and Emma came running in, breathless, there was a tremor in her voice. Daddy, Mrs. Kingsley, was out front. She was pointing at our house with some other people. Sam's stomach dropped. He stood, jaw set, feeling the old, slow burn of anger. He didn't sleep that night. And as the shadows grew deeper in his quiet neighborhood, he wondered if tomorrow would bring a confrontation he couldn't walk away from. The dawn before the deadline felt different. A fog crept low over the grass, shrouding every mailbox and fence post in a ghostly hush. Sam stood barefoot on the porch, the cold planks grounding him in the present moment. He held the last cup of coffee he'd have before everything changed. He watched as a trio of figures approached in the gloom. Loretta, unmistakable even in a raincoat. 2 board members flanked her, Mr. Phelps, the kind of man who never smiled, and Mrs. Kim, shoulders tight with nervous energy. They didn't speak as they reached the walkway. Sam met them halfway, the fog swallowing every other detail but their faces. "Mr. Harris," Loretta said, eyes flicking to the tomato cages, "you know why we're here." Sam clutched his cup, feeling the tremble in his own hands. "It's a few plants." Mr. Phelps cleared his throat. "Rules are rules." Sam glanced at Mrs. Kim. For a split second, her gaze met his, something like apology flickering there. Then she looked away. Loretta pulled out a clipboard, flipping pages with deliberate slowness. "You've been formally cited for noncompliance. Board members have voted. If the plants are not gone by tomorrow morning, you will be fined $100.00 each day until they are removed. Further legal action will be pursued if necessary." Sam forced himself to swallow. The world behind them faded. All he could see were faces. All he could hear was the blood rushing in his ears. He asked quietly, "Has anyone else ever been fined for this?" Loretta's lips pressed. Thinner. "Everyone else abides by the standards." He heard the unspoken threat there. The fog seemed to press closer. Sam's jaw tightened. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. "Thank you for your time," he said, voice flat, refusing to give her the satisfaction of anger. He turned and walked inside, the back of his neck prickling. All the way to the door, he could feel her waiting for him to crack. Inside, Emma waited at the kitchen table, eyes wide. She'd heard everything. "And might want our tomatoes gone, don't they?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Why do they hate them?" Her voice wavered. Sam crouched to face her. He didn't have the words to explain pettiness and power. Instead, he said, "Sometimes people just want everything their way and they forget what matters to everyone else." Emma's eyes dropped, lashes trembling. Sam's anger settled into something harder, something patient. He texted Rich, asked about alternative board members. He hit up neighborhood forums under a fake username, reading stories from other communities, how bylaws were written, how they could be changed. There were loopholes, but they were buried deep. As he read, Emma drifted outside. He heard her talk softly to the tomatoes, promising them her dad would protect them. He realized in that quiet ache that this wasn't just about plants. It was about showing Emma when to stand up and, maybe more important, how. But as the sun broke over Willowbrook, Sam spotted Loretta at the far end of the street, clipboard tucked beneath one arm. She was already plotting her next move, and she wasn't alone. There's a strange clarity that comes with an open threat. By noon, neighbors knew. Word traveled at the speed of gossip. Sam Harris, fined by the HOA for growing tomatoes. Some smirked behind closed doors. Others muttered their condolences at the mailbox, hands twitching towards their own gardens as if to reassure themselves they were safe. He felt eyes at his back as he crossed his own lawn, Emma's small hand in his. Sam watched Mrs. Evans hurry her twin sons past their driveway. Mr. Waters, who always waved, kept his face buried behind the sports section. Even Rich seemed to disappear before Sam could catch his eye. The summons came by afternoon, an HOA complaint hearing scheduled for Thursday, attendance mandatory. Sam stared at the copy of the notice, its legalese as heavy as a judge's gavel, consequences listed in bold font. Escalating fines, lien threats, possible legal action. The letter was signed, as always, by Loretta Kingsley. For hours, he sat at the table, hands folded, a storm raging quiet inside him. Could he afford this battle? Fines would stack. Lawyers were expensive. He had savings, but not the sort built for war. Emma watched him that evening, picking at her macaroni. "Are they going to take our house?" she asked, voice trembling. Sam forced a smile. "No, honey, they just want the plants gone." But even as he said it, doubt crept up his spine like a cold finger. After putting Emma to bed, Sam roamed the house, pacing. He thought of his late wife, her laugh wild, free, the woman who turned chaos into color. She would have stood her ground, he realized. She would have fought back. The hearing loomed on the calendar, a red mark that seemed to grow brighter with every step of his restless night. At 12:34 a.m., unable to sleep, Sam sat at his computer, searching for stories. How do you beat an HOA? He found stories of defeat, of families forced out, gardens razed under the threat of lawsuits. But there are other tales, one about a man who used maps, another about a woman who found a loophole in the original platting of her subdivision. A word stuck out to him: jurisdiction. Was there a way to prove the HOA's map was wrong? Had anyone checked lately? It was a foolish thought, but he bookmarked that story anyway. Outside, wind rattled the tomato cages. Sam wondered if by tomorrow his garden would be gone, or if there was still a crack in the foundation he hadn't found. In the shadow of fear, a new plan was born, a way to fight back, not just for himself, but for everyone forced to kneel beneath someone else's rule. He just needed time. But tomorrow's HOA hearing was coming fast, and Sam could feel the walls closing in around him. The day of the hearing arrived, heavy and gray. Rain slicked the streets, turning every step into a question mark. Sam donned his only suit, a little too tight, a little out of fashion, and practiced his speech in the mirror. Across the breakfast table, Emma watched every move. She wore her favorite backpack, already zipped for after-school pickup. "You're not really in trouble, right?" Her voice barely a whisper. He smiled softly. "No, sweetheart, I just have to talk to you some people about the rules." Emma nodded. Still uncertain, she pulled a small tomato from the kitchen window, or latest harvest, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "For good luck," she said. A lump formed in Sam's throat. Outside, the HOA meeting room felt colder than the day. Rows of metal chairs, cheap carpeting, drip of rain against a single window. Loretta sat at the head table, gavel poised, flanked by board members. Faces from the neighborhood dotted the audience: Mrs. Evans with her twins, Rich standing at the back, arms crossed. Sam took a breath, stood tall. Loretta began. "Mr. Harris, you're here today regarding multiple violations." He interrupted, gentle but firm. "I'd like to ask a question first." The room shifted, the air tightened. "Has anyone considered amending Section 9.3? Sam asked. "Edible plants are sustainable, low water, they add value, especially for families." Loretta's eyes narrowed. "The standards are in place for a reason." Sam pressed on, heart thundering. "But where did these standards come from? Who wrote them? Has anyone asked the neighborhood what they actually want?" Mr. Phelps looked uneasy. Mrs. Kim glanced down. Rich's voice carried from the back. "Maybe we should hear him out." Murmurs echoed. Loretta cleared her throat, her grip on the gavel tightening. "You are in violation until further notice," she snapped. "You have until midnight to remove the plants or face a daily fine." Sam's palms, slick with sweat, clenched at his side. "You've threatened me, marked my lawn, targeted my family. I will fight this, not just for me, for anyone who's sick of living in fear of pettiness. I want to formally request a review of Section 9.3, and I intend to file a complaint." For a moment, silence crackled in the room. Then Loretta smirked. "File whatever you like. The board has spoken." The metal clatter of her gavel struck the table. Decision made, with no pretense of fairness. Sam locked eyes with Rich as he left. There was a new resolve there, a willingness, perhaps, to stand up. But for now, the burden was Sam's alone. In his pocket, Emma's tomato pressed warm against his thumb. Outside, thunder rolled, shaking the walls. Sam realized it was time to fight in ways the HOA could never expect. But with every step back to his car, he wondered what hidden rules, what secrets might still tip the scales if only he could find them. What's more frightening than a wall, the knowledge that someone can move it whenever they want? Sam spent the next day digging into town records, determined to understand the true shape of his neighborhood. The sun came back bright, turning his sleepless face almost hopeful. Every click of the city website felt like an excavation, searching for the story beneath the story. He had never considered property maps before, those faded diagrams with their neat lines and cryptic numbers. But now each plat and parcel became a source of hope. In the town's online archive, he finally found it. The original Willowbrook plat map, scanned in grainy black and white. It was dated 6 years before the HOA even existed. Sam's heart pounded. The lots were numbered differently. The common green spaces were drawn in the wrong places. He compared it side by side against the glossy, full color map in today's HOA packet. Something didn't add up. A triangle of land, his land, that the HOA claimed jurisdiction over was shaded in as part of community green space on the new map, but clearly marked as a private front yard on the original. He stumbled back in his chair, breath short. Had no one ever noticed? Or had someone, maybe Loretta, decided to redraw those lines to fit her vision of order? He printed both maps and called Rich. "What is it?" Rich asked, voice tense. "Come over," Sam said. "You need to see this." Within 15 minutes, they were both hunched over the kitchen table. Sam pointed to the differences, explaining how the old plat showed a different reality. Rich stared, wide-eyed. "You're saying the HOA doesn't actually own part of your yard?" Sam nodded. "My tomatoes aren't in violation. On the original map, my front yard ends further out. The so-called common area starts a solid 10 feet away. And get this, there's no rule against growing anything on private lots. The board's only allowed to regulate shared spaces." Rich ran a hand through his hair. "So Loretta's bluffing. Or worse, she changed the map and no one questioned it." Sam wiped his palms, nerves buzzing. "If I'm right, there are over a dozen houses like mine. She's been bullying people off land that never belonged to the HOA at all." Rich leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "You need a lawyer, someone who knows property law." Sam exhaled. "And I need help getting the word out before she finds a way to shut me up." But even as he outlined his plan, unease gnawed at his stomach. How far would Loretta go to keep this quiet? And who, in the end, would the neighborhood really believe? The facts in black and white, or the voice that's ruled for so long? Every secret is a spark waiting to ignite. Sam called 3 lawyers before he found one who didn't hang up at the word hoe. By late afternoon, a young attorney named Julia Gutierrez met him at the kitchen table, tie askew, expression sharp. She leafed through the maps, eyes narrowing. "You're right. This is a mess." Sam watched her study the lines, chewing her pen cap. If the original plot was never amended by the city, then HOA rules can't override deeded property rights. And let me guess, no one in the neighborhood has ever seen the old survey? Sam shook his head. Julia smiled, thin and dangerous. "You have leverage. If you make this public, win or lose, they'll have to answer for it." But there were risks. Retaliation, legal expenses, alienation from neighbors already fearful of conflict. Sam hesitated. "If I go public, what will it cost?" Julia didn't sugarcoat it. "You'll make some enemies. They'll fight back hard, threats, fines, shaming at board meetings. But you're not alone now. You have the law. And sometimes that's enough." Her words bolstered him. So did daily reminders from Emma, who sketched little tomato cartoons and taped them to his laptop. Still, shadows fell early. Rich texted just before sunset. Loretta making rounds, neighbors nervous, some talking about siding with you. Sam looked out his window and saw Mrs. Kim pausing by his driveway, her face unreadable. Kids paused on bikes, glancing at his porch, as if something dangerous might jump from the tomatoes themselves. That night, Sam sent emails to every neighbor whose land matched his on the maps. He attached copies, highlighting the relevant lines. If even one believed him, maybe, just maybe, the tide would shift. But as he lay awake, a new worry settled in. Loretta wouldn't accept defeat quietly. Right outside his window, in the hush of midnight, headlights flashed across his lawn. Then a car idled at the curb, engine humming, a watcher in the dark. Sam felt a chill that wasn't entirely from fear, it was anticipation. Someone was trying to scare him. But the seeds of rebellion were already sown. And in Willowbrook, the ground was getting ready to crack open. It started as a whisper. Within a day, half a dozen neighbors knocked on Sam's door, maps in hand. Some bristled a defensive, certain he was stirring up trouble. Others were cautious, asking questions in low voices, wary of being overheard. Mrs. Evans arrived first, clutching her faded house deed. My son built a sandbox on common area last year, she confessed. Loretta made us tear it out. But this, she pointed at Sam's map. Are you sure? Sam nodded. He showed her how the property lines matched her deed. By lunchtime, Rich had rallied 3 more neighbors. By 3, 2 anonymous tips arrived in Sam's inbox. Scanned documents proving similar oversteps by the HOA dating back more than a decade. Julia, the lawyer, reviewed everything. She sent a formal letter to the board demanding an immediate halt to all enforcement on disputed land, citing the old plats, the deeds, the city code. Sam watched the first cracks appear in the HOA's mask. Loretta responded with a venomous letter of her own. She threatened escalating fines, emergency board meetings, public shaming, but the tone was different now, less certain, brittle at the edges. That evening, the block seemed to hold its breath. Kids huddled at the edge of lawns, daring each other to step onto the contested grass. Delivery men gossiped at mailboxes. The air buzzed with questions. Emma watched all this from the window, her tomato plant clasped tight, eyes wide but proud. Sam found himself, against all odds, becoming a voice for the overlooked, the left out, the quietly bullied. He didn't relish it. He just watched it happen, one conversation at a time. But then, as dusk fell, Julia called him with a warning. Loretta filed an injunction, an emergency meeting tomorrow night. She's going to try to shut you down, fast and hard. Pack the place if you want a chance. Sam ran a hand over his tired face. Tomorrow, everything would come to a head. But something deep within him, something stubborn and old, refused to back down. He called Rich, he texted the neighbors, he watched twilight flicker across the familiar curve of Willowbrook, and he wondered what secrets the board would try to bury in the next 24 hours. And if the truth would be enough. The emergency meeting was standing room only. Neighbors who had rarely spoken before packed into folding chairs, some clutching highlighted maps, others gripping deed copies with trembling hands. Kids hovered in doorways, eyes shining with the thrill of rebellion. Sam arrived with Emma at his side. She wore her red tomato shirt, head high. Loretta presided at the head table, expression marble cold. She tapped the microphone twice, tapping tension into the air. We are here to address acts of insubordination and the threat they pose to community harmony, she intoned, voice echoing. Sam stood, voice steady. I have proof. The land in question is protected by city plat and deed, not HOA declaration. You've been enforcing rules where you have no right. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Julia raised a hand, waving copies of the city record. Lorette's lips went thin. Even if there are discrepancies, the board is empowered under. Mrs. Kim, eyes flickering, finally interrupted. I move to suspend Section 9.3 enforcement until proper legal review can be completed. Rich seconded. A gasp, then a ripple of whispered approval. Neighbors shifting, looking at each other like they'd just woken up from a long, strange dream. Loretta fumbled, searching for control. She banged the gavel, insisting, "Order, this is not the time." Julia spoke up, calm and commanding. I have already filed notice of legal challenge. Any further fines or enforcement attempts on the disputed land may be considered harassment under state law. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Mrs. Evans, timid until now, stepped forward with her own map. Others followed, sharing their stories. Loretta shrank before their eyes, losing power one shaken rule at a time. But victory was not yet certain. Loretta announced a closed-door session, warning that the board would not be manipulated by misinformation. She announced an immediate suspension pending investigation. As people left, the air was alive with cautious hope. Sam watched Loretta linger at the table, her face a storm cloud. This wasn't over. Not even close. What would she do when she realized her power was truly slipping? Willowbrook had never felt this fragile or alive. Word spread, Section 9.3 was on hold. Neighbors who had tiptoed around rules for years swapped stories at the curb. A man who'd hidden a rosebush behind his garage now planted it by his porch. Mrs. Evanson rebuilt his sandbox. But power doesn't surrender quietly. Moretta launched her last offensive. Flyers appeared overnight. Protect our community from chaos. Anonymous emails threatened lawsuits, painting Sam as a disruptor, a troublemaker who put property values at risk. Sam felt it, cold shoulders from some, friendly nods from others. Emma, once shy, walked proudly past her tomatoes, but heard kids whisper on the playground. Julia's updates were a mix of hope and vigilance. The city scheduled a mediation with all parties present in 10 days. For now, nothing could be touched, not by the HOA, not by Sam. Late one night, Rich called him. They're talking about a recall on Loretta. Board members are scared, but the factions are splitting. She's desperate. Sam stared at the darkness outside, wondering what price you pay for standing firm. Down the block, lights flicked on at Loretta's house. She was up late, plotting something. He felt it deep in his bones. He checked the lock on the front door. What desperate measures would someone take to hold on to control, even as it all unraveled? The mediation day arrived with rain pounding the windows, insistent, unsparing. In a quiet city conference room, Sam, Julia, and Rich faced Loretta and the remaining board. A city official presided, cool and impartial. Maps were spread out on the table, evidence laid bare. Julia spoke with calm authority. The city plat predates the HOA's claim. These neighbors own their yards. Enforcement beyond your legal boundaries must cease immediately. Loretta's face tightened with every word, but the official was unmoved. We will conduct a full review, he said. Until then, all cited parties are free to maintain their properties as they see fit. Any adverse action by the HOA will be subject to sanction. For the first time, Sam saw a flicker of uncertainty in Loretta's eyes, a calculation of loss, the gradual fade of unchecked power. Afterward, Julia pulled Sam aside, voice hushed. There'll be more threats, more bluster, but the story is out now. The city knows. Sam felt exhaustion, relief, pride, a kaleidoscope of emotion he barely understood. As he left the building, Emma leapt into his arms. Did we win? She asked. He kissed her forehead, holding her tight. We're not finished, but we made a big difference. Outside, rain washed the city clean. The neighborhood was quiet when they returned, the tomatoes still standing proud, but Sam couldn't shake the feeling that one last secret was waiting to surface. What would happen when the rest of Loretta's story came out? Days passed, the neighborhood recalibrated, new alliances, old friendships dusted off after years of silence. Loretta's resignation was abrupt, her parting letter a bitter collection of grievances, blaming ingrates for her downfall. The board called for new elections. For the first time, neighbors volunteered. Sam was asked to serve. He almost declined until he saw Emma at the window, cradling a bright red tomato. "You change things, Daddy," she whispered. On the night of the first open forum, the community gathered outside, lit by strings of bulbs. Sam took the mic, voice shaking with purpose. "We're not here to police each other's tomatoes. We're here to make Willowbrook a place where everyone can grow something of their own." Applause rose, awkward at first, then strong. Later, walking home in the cool, dark, Sam brushed his fingers along the tomato cages. No white flags, no angry notes. But something felt unfinished. Emma squeezed his hand. "Will they ever try to take them away again?" Sam smiled softly. "They might, but we'll stand up. That's what matters." In the yard, dew glistened on leaves. The night brimmed with possibility. And somewhere beyond the dark, the whisper of another rule twisted, waiting for someone to challenge it. Because sometimes quiet victories are only the beginning. If this story moved you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories where justice, courage, and community collide. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment where the little guy stands tall. We'll see you in the next one.